I knew exactly what alcohol did to me, but actually giving it up, it took so much. Hey fam, welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things embodiment, entrepreneurship, and living our best, most delicious dream life. Today, we have Mr. Bunny and a couple of our babies here. We usually do, but today is extra special because we are talking about addiction and sobriety. So, goes without saying, but I will say it anyway. Trigger warning for all of you babes. If anyone's triggered by this conversation, feel free to pause or stop or get out of it or do some movements, process some emotions and release some stuff, or just you don't have to watch this. You can skip to the next video, which is totally fine. I do not mind, but I feel it's important to touch on this because it's an important thing to me. It's going to be a little hard to get through, I think, but we wrote some notes so I can hopefully just focus on my brain staying in check. So I guess we'll start from why. I have been sober from alcohol for a year and 8 months now. It's been a really powerful decision and one that I've been trying to make for many years, but I realized why I was drinking, and I realized that the amount I was drinking was not quote unquote normal, not healthy, not to socialize. I was just doing it to numb myself out. So obviously that needed to change. I started drinking when I was maybe 14. I was around it from my parents. My parents always drank. I don't believe that my dad and my stepmom drank unnecessarily or in like a bad way. They're pretty healthy minded, I would say, without even really knowing them very well at all, but they're pretty stable. They have unstable people around them, but they've always seemed quite stable. But my mum, who I cut out of my life many years ago, and I'm only 27, so cutting my mother out of my life when I was about 20, 21 was huge and kind of unheard of. I didn't know anybody that had done that, so yeah, if you've done that, I applaud you. It's not an easy thing to do, and maybe one of these videos I will go into why I did that. If you have any questions on anything that comes up, please just leave a comment below or message me on Instagram if you're maybe not comfortable sharing or opening up or asking questions. Yeah, I'm always here. So my Instagram, I will link it below. It is Kalilican, Kaalilican. So I was around alcohol from a very young age. I'm Australian. I grew up on the beaches, and I feel like there's a huge binge drinking culture. There's also heavy drug culture. There's coke, MDMA, and ice, actually, that I was around a lot as I was younger as well. One of my brothers was actually an ice addict. Yeah, I've seen some stuff. I've been around some stuff. I've had to try and help people recover while also having my own boundaries, which has been really difficult. My main story, I guess, started with my childhood trauma and stuff that I'm not going to go into much here because we could talk about that for a whole billion videos. But I basically started drinking at the age of like 14. My first drink was straight vodka in a park in the middle of nowhere with my friends. So that was kind of how we started. And then I kind of moved on to more bourbon and coke, and then like rum and coke. That was kind of like my drink. I could have a million of them. And be okay. Obviously I wasn't okay and I should not have had that many, but I thought I was totally fine. So I basically binge drank. I could never just have like one drink, like one beer or something. I needed to get that like euphoric feeling, get that like out of body sensation, that calm feeling that I felt came with it. So as soon as I started drinking, I was drinking almost every night while doing schoolwork, mostly just in parks because I didn't want to go home, which is what fueled the trauma and the drinking. I avoided home by drinking in a park with strangers, with guys that were like 4 years above us, and like they were great guys for the most part. They were actually super lovely, and A lot of them were stoners as well, which is probably where I get my affiliation with weed. But they were safe for the most part, which is actually amazing because I have definitely been around people that were incredibly unsafe. We might get to that a little bit later. But yeah, I used to drink in parks with random guys. After about a year, I found that I was drinking until I completely blacked out, and it would happen every single time. So I couldn't just drink for fun. I couldn't just have a few and then still be the life of the party. I kind of was the life of the party a little bit sometimes because I put all of my energy into that, and I was a completely different person. I was avoiding all of my emotions, so I was naturally the funny one. Go figure. Drank to not be at home, and in order to get through all of the stuff I was going through, I would binge drink until I blacked out. So I would still be doing stuff. I rarely actually passed out. I was still making out with people and going further with people that I literally would not remember in the morning. I would have no idea if we kissed, if I slept with one guy, 3 girls, 20 guys. I put myself in some really dangerous situations, and honestly, I am very surprised that some really bad stuff didn't happen till later on in life. I kind of was homeless for a few years, and I was staying at friends and just dating guys so that I could have a place to stay, and I would force myself to get drunk so that I could give them what they wanted or expected, which was my body, myself, even if I didn't like them or know them or really want anything of it. And then I'd wake up still drunk, get in my car, drive to work, still drunk, and start a 10-hour shift, go straight to the pub or go straight to a friend who was a few years older who I knew could supply us, and basically start the entire process again. So I basically sold my body unofficially. I sold my mind. I sold my heart because I wasn't with anybody that actually cared. I was very grateful that I was pretty safe, but it was not a good situation. And then our whole group was just basically mentally ill and ignoring it with alcohol and other drugs and doing dumb stuff in car parks. So yeah. So that lasted for 6 years, 8 years, maybe like 8 years. And then I went through a huge spiritual change. I cut off my mum sometime between 20 and 21. I left my ex, who I thought I was going to marry, who was completely toxic, and it would have been a terrible life with him. I left him in the same week, and I also finished my music degree. So being in the music degree was probably one of the problems as well, because everybody used to drink and do all this stuff at the pubs in between classes, after classes. You'd celebrate, you'd play at pubs, all of this stuff. I would get myself drunk and beg anybody, any guy, to take me home just to have a place to sleep because I didn't have anywhere. And I eventually found this guy who was super toxic and slept at his place a bunch, but hated every second of it, hated my life, was so depressed. That was the point where I was ready to end my life, and I tried and failed. I was seriously in that boat, but I managed to push myself through. I finished my music degree. I left my mum. I left my ex-partner, stacked all my things into my car and just drove up to my dad and hoped that he would take me in, which he did for like a couple of weeks or a month, and then they kind of kicked me out because they just cannot have anybody stay at their place again. They're just at a different age, and all the stuff that I was going through very much triggered them. I wasn't in a good place. I was drinking in my room alone, and they hated that. That was a trigger for them because they'd been through that with other kind of family, friends, and family. But at this point in my life, I went through a huge spiritual change. I ended up moving into a van not long later. I was dating girls again, which was super nice for me. Ended up getting into polyamory and this huge hippie culture, and did my yoga teacher training. And it was basically like 3 years of not really drinking. I had like 6 months after that where I was still binge drinking, and then I got through this eventually. I'd just been through enough. So that was probably the worst point, and then it got better. I went through this huge spiritual change. And I ended up being around a lot of spiritual people, going through my own stuff, learning my own lessons, and realizing that a lot of them were super damaged and unsafe to be around. So I went into that community with a completely naive state of mind. I trusted everybody. Everybody was like nude. It was like a nudist culture, all these things, which was beautiful at the time, I thought. You get a lot of unsafe characters coming into those places because it's so open and welcoming of everybody in whatever stage of life they're in, whatever they're going through, all this trauma. There's a lot of drugs. There's just completely alternative communities attract a lot of terrible people, unfortunately, and it's why I had to step away. I was fully immersed in it for quite a few years. It was huge for me. I was like completely out of normal society. I wasn't working a normal job. I was just living off like Centrelink and teaching yoga and living in a massive place with like 50 to 100 hippies, doing all these doofs all the time, things like that. But I was actually mostly sober during this time. So I smoked a little bit of weed, like maybe halfway through the experience I started smoking daily just to write music and things like that. But in terms of drinking, none of it. In terms of heavy drugs, none of it. I was around other people that were doing it constantly, and I was in trouble a lot of the time because of that. It doesn't matter how sober I was, if I had to stay with these people when they were high out of their minds and they had their own trauma they hadn't worked through, I got abused emotionally, sexually, mentally, a lot. Giving up alcohol was kind of only one step for me. I kind of had to go through this huge spiritual experience, ended up doing mushrooms with a shaman, and that was super eye-opening for me. I also went to therapy for like 3 years about my mom. There's a lot of stuff to work through, and eventually I came back to society being like, okay, I have this huge new plan. I am a businesswoman at heart. I want to make as much free content as I can, and then I want to have one-on-one mentorships where I can actually help people, because I spent so many years helping people for free and I got burnt out, which is why I had to give up my old business. But if I can actually learn how to charge and learn how to up my self-worth so that I can charge my worth for that, then I can actually have a sustainable business that feeds me and also allows me to actually be there for people in the long term. I can build a business that's actually going to last. I can have free courses. I can have all these different courses, one of which I actually will link down below. I have a massive course on a lot of these things that I've learned over the last bunch of years. I've done so much expensive training. I literally spent years of my life training. So I put it all into a course. The first chapter is completely free, so I will link that, and then the rest is available through that platform. I'd say going through all of that was just amazing. But I found that although I gave up alcohol for a few years, I'd say maybe like at least 2 or 3, when I came back into society, I fell straight back into that go to work, come home, get drunk thing. Had another huge breakup, lost my house because I was living in a different van. So I lost my transport and my house and my partner all in one day. I found alcohol again, and then kind of moved into this queer-friendly space in the inner west, which was amazing, in Sydney. Turned out to literally be living with at least 1, if not 2, genuinely crazy people. I know it's probably not the right word to use, but in terms of being unsafe because of somebody's mental illness that's undiagnosed / maybe it was diagnosed but they weren't taking the right medications for it, and putting all the stress onto other people, literally screaming at 4 a.m. for no reason, and having really loud obtrusive sex with strangers for money in the home that I was living in, right next door. That was what I was living with, and of course I turned to alcohol for that. And then I moved out of that house and was like, nah, like I can't do it anymore. I went into New Year's Eve of 2020 sober. I was the sober one of the house. I looked after everybody as they were all doing all sorts of stuff. And we had a really kind of wholesome, well, my part was wholesome. Then I forced myself to go to sleep, or at least tried to, while they partied on. I had a wholesome coming into 2021, and that was huge for me. I thought that was going to be it for me. I'd kind of tried to give up alcohol a bunch of times before then, but coming into the new year sober was amazing. And then I slipped up about a week later when we had beer at the house, and I just went to grab one. I had half of it and I almost vomited. I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this to myself. I knew exactly what alcohol did to me, but actually giving it up, it took so much. And honestly, I'm still working through all of my childhood traumas. I knew I had a problem from a very young age, and stepping away from the people that I felt was helping cause that issue was huge. I went celibate at the same time. I ended up meeting a beautiful man who is now my husband. I finally put myself in a space where I felt safe, home-wise, relationship-wise, friendship-wise. I cut out everybody who was not good for me. I blocked everybody on social medias. I stopped going out. I literally just stopped. I found a couple of good friends that respected my sobriety. I joined TikTok and just found this whole community of people who were sober and at least talking about it publicly, and I felt like that was a huge step for me to just be in the presence of other people who were going through it. Even if they like slipped up or something, they were talking about it and they were being honest with their experience. And that was the biggest thing for me. Although I didn't have to go to a clinic, I didn't have to go to rehab for it. I had friends that did, I knew people that did. I've always been one to kind of work through my own stuff, and I knew that it came from childhood traumas. So me cutting out all these people and doing more spiritual work was my path. I'm definitely not against going to AA meetings, all of those kind of things, but I feel like now it's not an issue. It's definitely a choice, and it's still hard to accept invites to pubs or to friends' places where I know there's going to be drinking because it's a house party. Even if it's really close people that I work with, I know everybody's going to be kind of binge drinking because that's the culture and that's the age that we're in. But I still haven't been able to go to any of these events, even though I've known them for a few months / almost a year with other people. I just choose not to go to the events if I feel like it could be an issue for me. And if I do decide to go, which I do want to eventually, I'm going with my 2 sober buddies that I also work with, making sure that we go together. We're going to have a plan, we're going to have communication around it, check in with each other. I'll make myself like something really fun, like if I want an iced latte or if I'm really craving like a Coca-Cola or something, I'll make sure I have my own drinks and I have them safe close by me. I'm not going to leave them out. I've also developed this anxiety around getting my drinks spiked because of the traumas that I've been through. So I just know that I will keep it close by, even if I know everybody in the room. I cannot trust everyone because that has been a huge mistake for me before, multiple times. I feel like I'm at a place now where I can obviously talk about it. I'm pretty okay talking about it. It does bring a lot of stuff up, but it's mostly bringing stuff up about my triggers with my like family and less about the actual drink itself. So yeah, I hope to never have a drink again. My husband is totally okay with that. He's super supportive of me. We communicate a lot about how much I smoke because I only smoke to sleep. I make sure I don't smoke during the day because that's when it gets really bad. Who knows, eventually maybe I might give up that as well. But yeah, if you are struggling, obviously please go see a professional. This hopefully can help some of you, if not just one of you in your process, just to know that you're not alone. Something that has been coming up for me is that I guilted myself a lot because I feel like I wasn't a big enough addict to have these issues, to go through sobriety, to have to stick to something so much, to have to cut so many people out and change so much of my life. Because I saw my brother go through an ice addiction, and I saw a lot of other people go through a lot of other addictions, and end up not keeping their lives. I felt like I wasn't valid. I feel like I wasn't valid because it just came from childhood trauma, and that's why I drank. Like, I didn't go through a war. Everybody goes through stuff. Everybody has really heavy stuff they go through, and it's not comparable to other people's traumas. So yeah, please try to remember that if you're going through any of this stuff. I hope that was a little bit of an insight into me and my story and kind of how I am, how I got here. Yeah, if you are struggling, please go and see somebody, see a professional, see a bunch of professionals until you find somebody that you are comfortable talking to as well. That's super important. Don't give up on your journey. If you slip up, it happens. Get back on the wagon. It's a choice to make each and every day, and you have to know why you're making it. Don't do it because somebody else is doing it for fun. You need your own reasons, and don't attach it to somebody else, because if they slip up, then you might slip up because it's not actually something you're doing for yourself. I try and find a community, go to some meetings if that helps you, and yeah, I hope you are doing okay, and thank you for watching and listening if you got this far. We'll see you in the next one. Bye, babies.